The problem with clinical depression, said the psychiatrist, is that it's like a heart attack. Once you've had it once, there's a high chance you'll have it again. I was sitting in an office in King's College Hospital, in one of those rooms they take you to when they have bad news to impart. Hard plastic chairs, but a pretty picture on the wall to soften the edges of the room. I'd made my way down there, down the long corridors, smelling of surgical spirit. Odour hospital, as my mother, a former nurse, used to call it. I thought I was seeing a psychologist to help me deal with the profound energy issues I'd been experiencing, where some days I just couldn't get out of bed and other days I just couldn't stop crying. Deep, dramatic sobs that filled my whole body and would suddenly overtake me when I wasn't looking. But as I stared at the headed notepaper on the psychologist's table, I spotted the headline, Maudsley Hospital, followed by her name and the title, Consultant Psychiatrist. I started to feel jaw-clenchingly anxious. As a theatre nurse, my mother was all about blood, internal organs and things physical. She called psychiatrists trick cyclists and couldn't accept that mental health, or mental ill health in my case, was real. How could I tell her that a trick cyclist had just diagnosed me with clinical depression? I grew up in a church-going family. My dad was a church organist who came from a long line of vicars and priests, even bishops. Both my parents nearly entered the service of the church, and while neither of them actually ended up there, the weekly trek to church was a constant in my childhood, as were lengthy discussions about God and the teaching of Jesus round my grandparents' dining room table. As a youngster, most of it went way over my head, with one exception: forgiveness, and the idea that if someone hurt you, you should turn the other cheek. I can see myself now, brow furrowed in a slight scowl, brain whirring madly as I tried to figure out how turning the other cheek was a useful way of forgiving people who hurt you. It wasn't a question I wanted to share with my parents, as it would look as if I was doubting their beliefs and I didn't want to hurt them. But at the all-girls boarding school I attended, I was badly bullied, and turning the other cheek had two possible outcomes. Either the bullies would laugh at me, or they'd take things literally and give me a good slap. Whichever way you looked at it, the outcome was painful. But if turning the other cheek wasn't the answer, then what was? My survival tactic was to pretend I didn't care. I pushed down my feelings of rage, resentment, hurt and hate, and tried to act as if nothing they could throw at me could touch me. In fact, I turned my whole body away, not just my cheek, and I turned it away from myself as well as much as from other people. I became an emotional ice block from the neck downwards until my conversation at the Maudsley, where I decided that A, I would heal myself without clinical help, and B, once healed, I would never get clinical depression again. In my road out of depression, I tried many things. Psychotherapy, fun hours spent beating the hell out of a pillow with a baseball bat. Heavy breathing over an extended period to put me back in the womb state, something known as rebirthing. I remember wailing a lot, but it had little effect on the depression. Primal scream wasn't helpful either. I found myself screaming at my parents to stop it when I relived one of their frequent arguments, but it just left me with more residual trauma to deal with, not less. And then there were the extended periods of self-torture masquerading as personal development. You probably know those kinds of courses. It wasn't until I came across the Hawaiian forgiveness process, known as oponopono, that things really started to turn around for me. It's a simple enough process. You imagine a stage and invite someone you want to forgive onto it and have a conversation along the lines of, I forgive you, please forgive me. I didn't know why it worked, but it did. Suddenly years of bitterness and anger and resentment, even rage, seemed to slip away as I had imaginary conversations with people who had hurt me 20 or 30 years before. I realised this was something I should be teaching. It wasn't so much a question of who are you to teach this as who are you not to teach it. With my history, I'm ideal because I'm a walking, talking example of someone who held on so tightly to old hurts until they hurt me, and then used forgiveness to release all that and to keep me released. 30 years after my conversation with the psychiatrist, I've never had that recurrence she promised me. I've had my share of life's difficulties, but things that once might have pushed me back into that darkness, like my mum's journey through a rather aggressive form of dementia, haven't, because I actively practice forgiveness pretty much on a daily basis. Finally, I understand the how, and I forgive. Not because God says I should, but because it makes my soul sing. Forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts of my life.